Hello and welcome to Running on Carbs podcast. I'm your host, Coach Val, and I would like to welcome you to episode number 33 of the podcast today. I am super excited to have you here today so that I could share with you a very special experience that I had over the weekend this past week. Something that was a very long time coming. And if you saw the episode name, you will see that this is my redemption half marathon. And I will go into that a little bit more about why I am redeeming myself and what that is. So, but first of all, I wanted to share that, I've listened to podcasts for a number of years. I love, love, love podcasts, but there's some podcasts that I love very much, but that I can't listen to while I'm doing certain things because there are so many commercials and like promo spots and things like that that I have to skip through in order to actually listen to the podcast while I'm doing something. So, like if I'm driving or if I'm trying to run, I can't listen to those podcasts because there's too many promos. So, this podcast, as you know, if you've listened to this for any amount of time, I don't have advertisers, I don't have promos, I don't plan to. I love to just put this podcast out there as a passion project and to help others and to share with you my story so that they could help you in whatever your running journey or plant based journey is. So, that is how I prefer to keep that so that there aren't any sponsorships. But the only thing that I ask in return from you is if you do enjoy the podcast, that you share it or that you write a review or give it 5 stars. Anything you can do if you want to share it on social media. All of those things really help to keep me going on the podcast and to get reach with it. And it doesn't cost a thing, but boy, it sure does show a lot of love, and I show love back and appreciation. So if you wouldn't mind doing that, if you're enjoying the episodes, then I would really appreciate that. So thank you in advance if you feel so compelled to share it. Even if you share it with a friend, with a plant-based friend or a running friend, that would be really appreciated, and hopefully they will get something out of it as well. All right. So thank you for that. And let's jump into the episode because I got a lot to share with you. I'm like bubbling with lots of, excitement to share what happened over the weekend. So first of all, a little bit of history in case you haven't been here very long. I do have a whole podcast episode about my stress fracture journey. So if that is something that you are dealing with, or if you just want to know the history, then there's a whole episode on that about how I got this stress fracture and what that whole ordeal looked like. But I experienced a femoral neck stress fracture in July of 2023. And it is currently, as of the recording of this episode, November 2024. So that kind of gives you a timeline to consider. And I didn't know that I had the stress fracture in July. That was just when the pain overwhelmed me and I had to stop running. I wasn't actually diagnosed with the MRI for that stress fracture until September of 2023. So there was some time in there where I didn't know what was causing that pain. And I was doing all sorts of crazy stuff. But again, that's in my stress fracture story. I don't want to go into that right now. But the experience or the recovery once that diagnosis was made was I was on crutches, non-weight bearing for 6 weeks. And then I was on 50% weight bearing for another 2 weeks. But there was I think there was an extra week in there when I was non-weight bearing because there was like a week between appointments. So technically I was actually non-weight bearing for 7 weeks. So I was on crutches for 9 total weeks, and then I could start walking without crutches. I did not start walking without crutches until November of 2023, and that was 2 days before Thanksgiving. So 2 days before Thanksgiving, I could ditch the crutches and finally walk on my own accord, and the first thing I did? I went to Costco and went to go Thanksgiving food shopping at Costco. That was my first outing. I walked like a mile. I don't know if that was good or not, but I survived, so it was okay. Um, I was not actually, though, cleared for, activity for a while after that. So, in in December, I was supposed to be cleared from that stress fracture to go back to more high impact activity, but I had an MRI in December of 2023, and they found a secondary injury. They found edema or swelling in the, head of the femur, which had not had any edema previously. So it was a new finding. So that actually set me back 3 months. I was supposed to be cleared in December or maybe January, but I didn't actually get cleared, until, April, in order to go back to high impact activity. So that was when I first started being able to, uh, d to start a run walk program, and it was very, very light. Like, I would start with 30 seconds of jogging and then maybe 2 minutes of walking. It was a very, very slow progression, lots of physical therapy to support that, and it took a long time to build up endurance because when you have been off of your leg for that long, you lose muscle, tone and strength, you lose, elasticity, blood flow is an issue. I mean, there's so many things that your body has to relearn and get back on get back on track. So, it was a long, slow process, but within a couple of months, I was starting to run more consistently, and then I was able to start running without taking those walk breaks, and again, I did that in a very slow, gradual, progressive, fashion. Once I was doing that and I was running, at a consistent rate and I could, run longer distances, not long, long distances, but a couple miles, without stopping and taking those walk breaks, I decided at that point I was probably ready to start training for longer endurance, events, and I thought, "Well, I'm gonna start training for a half marathon and see how it goes," and I really didn't put any pressure on myself as far as, like, having to stick to the plan. Like, if I told myself up front when I started this training plan, it was a 12-week training plan that I wrote, a while back, and it's called Get Me to the Finish Line. It's over on, Final Surge if it's a plan that you're interested in and that you wanna take a look at, and it's ideally suited for a brand new runner who can do maybe 5 miles, of distance, and then they wanna progress to a half marathon, but there's no speed work in it. It's all easy running, and it's purely endurance based. So it's purely to literally get you to the finish line, and that's it, not necessarily at a time goal. So it was really ideal for what I wanted to do for myself. I just wanted to have the endurance built to get back to half marathon distance, but I really didn't care about a time. So I started training, knowing that if I started to have any kind of pain or any type of niggles or issues that I would stop or that I would pull back or that I would skip that run. I was very disciplined and diligent about what that training plan was going to look for me because when you come off of a very serious injury like a stress fracture, there is also a mental side to that where you're kind of afraid to push yourself, and it seems like every little stiffness or every little niggle is frightening, and you're not real sure if it's going to develop into something more, if that tightness is actually, a stress fracture starting, or that tightness is going to lead to a counterbalance and a compensation that's going to cause a different injury. So there's a whole mental side to this recovery as well. And so I was really giving myself grace during this training plan, knowing that those things could come up. And if they did, I would back off. So I went into it with that mentality. And I think that was a very healthy mentality to go into a training plan with, considering where I was coming from. All of the runs during the training plan were conversational pace. So I decided that since I was starting over in my fitness and my running, it really was an ideal time to start practicing low heart rate training. I wasn't, I wasn't like stepping back from any pace work. So that's oftentimes a concern that people have when they start low heart rate training is if they've been running more faster paces, doing tempo runs and threshold and things like that, and then they start working with a coach and the coach is helping them learn lower heart rate training, um, they get really frustrated because they have to slow everything down and they get frustrated with the process because it is a slow process. I did the low heart rate training from April to November, and it was I mean, even that is, like, not a long time, really. I'll continue to work on it even from here forward, but that was definitely a good start in my training, and I absolutely noticed a difference, but if I would have been doing pace work before that and then cutting back to, 11.5-minute miles and things like that, that might have been really frustrating if I was coming from, like, 10-minute miles or 8-minute miles or something, um, although frustrating doesn't mean it's wrong. So keep that in mind. It's all depends on your ultimate goal. So my ultimate goal was endurance, and I knew that low heart rate training was the best option for me to teach my body endurance over time as I was returning to running. So I consistently trained at low heart rate, um, no matter whether I was doing a long run or shorter runs. All of my runs were conversational pace. Um, I also so my training not only consisted of runs, but I also incorporated strength training consistently. And this is really where my training differs this round of or this training plan versus say a training plan that I did for a half marathon in 2023 just before my fracture occurred. So the difference there is that I had strength training on my calendar in 2023, but I was very inconsistent with it. I didn't do it very often. However, this time around, I was extremely consistent with my strength training. I know how important it is. Also, I knew that I needed to build the strength in the lower legs and I'm sorry, in the lower limbs, um, because they were, somewhat atrophied after all that time on crutches and then just walking and things like that. So I strength trained 2 to 3 times a week, different programs, um, and different times and stuff. Even if I couldn't get in a full strength workout, like half hour, 45 minutes, if I only had time for 15, 20 minutes of strength, I would just do that. But I purposely stayed very consistent in my schedule because I knew that a little bit of strength training was better than none. So I did that, like I said, maybe, well, I would say 3 to 4 days a week. Um, I would strength train minimally, but like full strength workouts, I'd say 2 to 3 days a week. Um, and one of those days I would incorporate once I got them, I got these new, strap what are they called? They're like TRX, but off-brand TRX strap system, um, that, you could do all sorts of body weight exercises with. Those are a game changer. They are so awesome. If you haven't used those, I highly recommend them. Um, but I would do that just to kind of change things up, and then the other couple days I would do weights, heavy weights as well, and I just had a certain, lower body, upper body, total body, just kind of mixed it all up, as far as, like, what my strength training program consisted of, and then I also incorporated 1 day of cross training. So I would do either, pool jogging, which I didn't do a lot of, I did that more before my training plan, and it was I mean, it's horribly boring, but it actually is really, it's really good for you, and I would get out of the pool feeling, like, really energized and feeling not tired and worn out, um, but it's just the matter of I'm not a big pool person, so it's hard to get me into the pool itself. But I did enjoy it once I was there and once I was in it. So I may go back to some pool jogging, but pool jogging is a great cross training activity because it's no weight bearing. If you are also doing weight bearing exercises, then it's a great alternative. But what I mainly focused on for my cross training was the spin bike, and so I would do that once a week, spin bike, and then after the spin bike, I do some um, suspension trainer. That's what it's called, suspension trainer. Suspension trainer exercises. So depending on the amount of time I had for the day, I don't know, maybe 45 minutes or so usually of strength training because I would do that on a weekend, and that was my training. And then I would run 4 days a week for the training plan, and that was my training plan for the half marathon. So, skipping forward, that was the plan, that was what I did as far as my training. So, I'm gonna jump forward to the race recap. Um, Hydration and fueling are so primarily important when you are doing a half marathon or any type of endurance event, a half marathon, marathon. Um, but for me, this race, I did the Santa Barbara Half Marathon on November 3rd. And first of all, the weather was absolutely perfect and gorgeous. And I was a little concerned because there was rain the day before, but I was very confident. I knew that the rain would be gone. I had all the faith in the world. Rain would be gone. The only concern I had was that, when you'd have an early morning race, it's like freezing cold. And then you're, whatever, 4 or 5 miles into the race, and all of a sudden the sun comes out and you're blazing hot. So you're like freezing in the first half and then you're blazing hot in the second. So it's always hard to figure out, how do I dress for this? But in this case, it worked out beautifully because there was the time change on the same day. So when the time changed, that meant you jumped forward an hour. And so the temperatures were a little bit warmer than what I anticipated. So it actually ended up being perfect. I just wore my little throwaway jacket. I call it a throwaway jacket, but basically I went to the Goodwill and I bought a jacket secondhand, primarily just for use in the morning of the race. I wore the jacket as I walked over to the race, and then while I was in the corral, when you're just standing still, and then just as I was coming up toward the start line, I took the jacket off, put it on the side. There were a couple other, there were always jackets and things like that hanging there where other people did this. And then later, the volunteers from the race will come along and collect all the clothes, and then they'll donate it back to some nonprofit for donation. So I call it a throwaway jacket, but really it's like redonate jacket. So I was comfortable while I was in the corral. I just took that off and I had my tank on, and then I was comfortable the whole time because this race, I'll tell you in a minute about the course itself, but there's hills involved. And so, yeah, I didn't need that jacket for even 5 minutes after I started running. So it was perfect. So the hydration started just before, or actually when I woke up in the morning. Actually, if I think about it, it really started the day before because I was drinking a lot of water leading up to the race, and making sure that I was well hydrated. But then the morning of the race, as soon as I got up, I started drinking electrolytes. So I had electrolyte drink, and then I skipped or switched over to water. Of course, I had my coffee in there too, but counterbalanced it with all my hydration. Um, and I had a normal breakfast. I always bring my Ezekiel English muffin. And of course, if you've listened to my travel podcast episode, you know that I bring my own toaster. So I had my own toaster and I toasted my Ezekiel English muffins and had my almond butter with me. So, and I also brought my own beets and balsamic vinegar. So I had my normal breakfast that I always have before my long runs, had that with me, and had my regular breakfast. So that was great. And then for the race itself, I wanted to make sure I was really well hydrated. I've found that I'm a very salty sweater, so I get all of the like white, salty crust on my skin during races and hard efforts, long runs, and things like that. So I know that I need a little extra sodium. So I switched over to Element during this training program and tested it out and found that it was actually very helpful. So I had element hydration packets in my water bladder. I like to wear a vest. I'm a vest person. So I like when I can run a race that allows for a vest with a water bladder. So I put the element in my bladder and my backpack bladder. um, and it was perfect. And then I had a couple of gels for the race itself. I tend to take my gels like every 30 minutes ish, roughly. So since I have a good breakfast before I start the race and I know I'm topped off on all my glycogen stores and stuff, then because I'd been eating really well, by the way, up until this point, like, you know, when I travel, I'm like, okay, food, lots of food. So I was very well nourished by that point. So my fueling is I take my first gel at mile 4, and then I'll take it every 3 miles after that, which for me is usually roughly every half hour. So I took a gel and I used Humagels this time. I took a Humagel at mile 4, 7, and 10. And I had the first one had 1 times caffeine. The second gel did not have caffeine. And then the third gel had double caffeine, 2 times caffeine. And I have to say that during the race, though, I don't know what it is, but my brain was like, "I really don't want this gel." It was like my body did not want it, but I knew that I needed it. So my body's like, "Ugh, I don't wanna take in any fuel right now. I don't want any flavors and such." But obviously, I know better in my mind that my body needs it. And so I made myself take the gels, and I'm so glad I did because I know I needed it. So I took my gels all on time, got them down, didn't make me sick or anything. They were fine. It's just the brain is like, wait a minute, I'm working really hard. I really don't want to eat right now. But you just kind of get to get past that. And that's why we practice in training. And that's why we practice our fueling on our long runs, because during race day, we're going at even harder efforts, and that can definitely happen. So we got to be sure that we've prepared our bodies and we know how to take in fueling and how our bodies are going to react to taking in fueling while we're running. So I did practice that and it was good. I have to say that after the race, my legs were so twitchy, like they wanted to cramp. So I still feel like I could have had even more hydration and maybe more electrolytes, even than what I had. So I did have another element pack with me, and I drank that, post race while I was in the hotel room, just trying to relax, and maybe I was trying to take a nap, but that was not successful because my legs were so twitchy. So I did, I did take, or yeah, drink another element pack, and it did help. So I think that's really what I did at the time. So, race recap. Let me tell you about this course. The course is so gorgeous. So, if you've never been to Santa Barbara, California, it is a beautiful town. There are like no buildings over 2 story. It's very quaint. You have all of the amenities of a city, but yet it feels like a little beach town. So, traffic, not too bad. Parking, awful. So, just be prepared if you go to Santa Barbara to be hunting for parking. I stayed at a hotel that was very near the race course start line. So, and they had a parking lot. So, thank goodness I had parking with my hotel. So, for me, that made it a lot better. It's just when you leave the hotel and you go anywhere, you got to find parking. My only complaint. Um, but anyway, the location, though, was absolutely beautiful, and so this course runs mostly right along the beach. So you've got ocean views going out, you got ocean views coming back, and then you go up into the neighborhoods, and you run past all these beautiful little homes, until you get into town, into downtown on State Street. And then you go up State Street and around a park, and then you come back down State Street, which is like a main road in Santa Barbara downtown. and then there's the finish line. So it was a beautiful course. I highly recommend it for just the beauty and location. Um, the temperatures at the start of the race were 52 degrees according to my Coros after the fact. Cloudy with breaking away to sunshine, and then I'd say midway through the course and by the end of the course, it was sunny, along the way. I don't even know when the clouds broke, but at some point, the clouds broke and it was sunny, and it was probably, like, upper 60s, I think, by the time I finished the course. So, beautiful, perfect running weather. Absolutely beautiful. The course itself is pretty flat when you first start. So when you first start out, you're on State Street, um, and you come out to the road that runs along, like, shore I think it's called Shoreline, runs along the beach, and you start going toward the neighborhoods, and you're going up a hill. So pretty quickly, you start into the hills, and the hills, it was kind of nice because each of these hills were kinda like little mini hills. They got steeper and steeper the further you went, but there were like little plateaus in between each hill. So it's almost kinda like you got a little reprieve, at some flats or nearly flat, and then you would go up to the next level, and then you get a little flat, and then you'd go up, even further. And that was, I'd say, I think it was roughly about 2.5 miles to the turnaround. Felt longer, but it was really only about 2.5 miles. And then you do a turnaround and you come back the same way. So it's like an out and back on that end. And so now you get to turn around and come down all those hills. So I was really able to pick up my pace when I did that. Um, and it was nice. I mean, I felt like I was flying down these hills. So really nice, counterbalance to the up that I had to go through in the beginning. But I gotta say, I'd much rather go up those hills in the beginning rather than up all those hills at the end. So it's a nicely designed course with that in mind. And all the middle miles are just mostly flat. So you're just running along the road along the beach for several miles until you come back up. I think it's up Cabrillo, I want to say. My map's over here. I can't remember. Um, or Castillo or Cabrillo. Sorry, I can't remember. And then you cut into the neighborhood, like I was saying. And then you have another hill at mile 11, though. And that one really kinda got me. So, I was tired by then. And so that hill kinda slowed me down a little bit. It's not steep, but it's just the timing of it. And when this is my first half marathon back, my first training plan, whew, I was feeling it. So, I was feeling it by mile 11 on that hill. But I made it up the hill, and then I knew once I rounded the corner of that little hill and came around the park, the rest was turn around and come down, and it was downhill all the way to the finish line after that. So, that kinda kept me going, and I really picked up my pace. I think I picked up my pace a little early, not too bad. I mean, I was able to hold it, but whew, I was tired, and my heart rate was getting up there, in that last mile. So, like, around, mile 12, right toward the end, that last mile, I was really pushing it, to try to pick up some time from these hills, uh, and and I know I didn't have a time goal, and honestly, at that time, I didn't even know how long I'd been running. Every once in a while, I'd kinda glance at my watch, and I do remember glancing at my watch in that last mile. I don't think I saw the right time, though. I thought I had, I thought I was about to beat my PR, and I thought, "Well, if I pick up my pace, I could actually hit my PR and maybe beat it." And so I started running harder with this in my mind, and, I did not do that. However, I came very, very close. Um, Actually, in the end, I was only 4 minutes off from my personal best that I had attained only a year prior, just before I experienced that fracture. So, a month before I had to stop running from that stress fracture, I had actually PR'd at, the San Diego Half Marathon, um, and and so I was like, "Oh, can I beat it?" I didn't quite, but boy, I'm very happy with my time. especially considering all of this. Um, and that mile 12, what really kept me going and what got me going at my pace was I started thinking about where I had come from and where I was at that moment. And I started thinking about these dates that I've been talking about, and realized that this time, at that moment that I was running the race last year, I was on crutches. I was still on crutches. And at that time, on November 3rd last year, I still had a couple of weeks to go before I would get off those crutches before Thanksgiving. So it didn't really matter at that moment what my time was. I didn't care if I had to walk at that point, even though I didn't feel like I had to walk. I just was so just thankful and grateful to be running that race and to come through a 12-week training plan to get to where I was in that moment at mile 12, coming down the hill toward a finish line. And I started feeling really emotional. But I have to say, I couldn't cry because I swear I was way too tired to cry. I was exhausted, but I was really happy. And I mean, when I started thinking about that, I just felt like my feet were just kinda going, and as tired as I was, I had so much energy at that moment that I could just, like, compel myself forward is how it felt. It was almost like there was no thinking anymore. It was just running and gratefulness and knowing about what was waiting for me at the finish line. So with this, I have to say that the family support that I had on this course was something I've never experienced before in all of my years of running. Oftentimes, it's either just me and my sister, where she waits for me at the finish line. She drops me off usually in the morning and then waits for me at the finish line, gets a video, and then we go off and celebrate. Or, she's been traveling quite a lot lately, and so it could just be me at the race, and sometimes it's just me. I take myself there, I run the race, and that's it. Um, but this time, I specifically chose this race in Santa Barbara because that's where my son and his girlfriend are, and they had promised me that they would come to the race and cheer me on if I did the race in Santa Barbara. So, that was what I was looking forward to. And then along the way, I was talking to my sister, and she said, "Well, I'm traveling, but I'm making my way back into California. I think I can time myself to be there at the race." And so she and her boyfriend were able to meet me at the race also. And then about a week or so before the race, I get a text from one of my nieces, and she says, "Hey, Aunt Val, we're going to come, me and my sister, we're going to come meet you at your race, and we're going to come and celebrate with you at your race." So I had my nieces, I had my son and his girlfriend, my sister, her boyfriend. We had a big, huge crowd, and I saw them all over the course. So it was really cool. When I first started off, at the start line, I thought they had just kind of walked away. So my sister and her boyfriend had walked me over to they came to the hotel, and then they walked me over to the start line, and then I kinda said my, goodbyes, and I'll see you at the end, and went and lined up in the queue. And, but then as I was coming to the start line and just started picking up my pace to cross over the start line, I hear, "Hey, Aunt Val, yoo-hoo," and like screaming. And I look over and I see my niece and my sister and everybody, and they're all cheering and waving. So I got to see them at the start line, which is so cool. So that set me off, and sent me on my way. And then my son and his girlfriend, they were gonna meet me around mile 6 when things got flat and they were by the beach, and I didn't see them. So I thought, I guess maybe they couldn't get through. I don't know what happened to them." So I didn't see them. And then I got to the turnaround point and I started coming back the other direction, and then I hear my name again, "Hey, mom." That's my other name. My other name is Mom. And I kinda look over my shoulder, and there they are on their bikes with the little dog too. They have a little dog. And so there they were on their bikes, and so they, rode along with me for a little bit. And, at that point in time in those middle miles, it's like my cruise miles. So I was really in my zone. So I wasn't really talking much at that point because I didn't wanna expend a lot of energy. I wanted to keep my pace up because I had a really good pace going around that time. And so we really didn't chat a lot. I just kind of, they said, "How you feeling?" I'm like, "Yep, great," thumbs up. And then I just kinda kept going. So I saw them for a little bit. They rode along with me on their bikes, off on the sidewalk on the side, for, I don't know, maybe a mile or so. And then, I just kinda went on my way, and I saw them again maybe another mile down the road. They were on the other side and, "Yay, mom, go." They hear from across the way. So I give them a little wave, so that was really cool to see them, like, on the course with a little extra cheering. And, um, and then I just kind of went up that dang hill at mile 11. And as I was coming back down, the finish line or toward the finish line, then I saw my family again, my sister and the nieces and everybody. I saw them again cheering and yelling, just as I was crossing the finish line. So it was, it's just an amazing experience just to have that family support. Um, I mean, there's something to be said about, the focus and discipline of, like, running a fast race and just, being really disciplined on it and having a goal and setting it and reaching it. But then there's also a time and a place for just having fun and, bringing the family together. And the beauty of all of this, and it very serendipitous, is that, and I have my medal here. So if you're on YouTube, I'm going to show you my medal. So the medal, the message for this race is moving together brings us together. So it was absolutely a beautiful message, for this race to have that theme, and to have all of my family come together like that, to support. So they might have not been moving as fast as me, but the mere fact that I was moving still brought us all together. And that was so beautiful, and this is absolutely a memory I will hold and, dear to my heart for many, many years to come. Um, and it was, I wish I could have cried at the finish line just because I feel like there would have been some, like, release, but all I could do was just feel emotional and all of the overwhelm and joy. I really was too tired to cry. And also, I was just so sweaty. It's like I sweat out all my tears all in on the road, I think. So, it was fine. But really, going back to the training for this race, that low heart rate training really paid off. So, as I don't know if I had mentioned earlier, so all of my runs that I did, during training, as I said, they were conversational pace. So, I'll talk a little bit about paces. I don't usually like to talk about paces, but I want to give you context, for low heart rate training, conversational pace versus racing. So, I'm not the speediest runner, okay, but that's okay. Um, I know how to do it, and that's what's more important. So, my paces while I was running, were 11-minute, 15-second miles to maybe 11-minute, 30-second miles during my training, and that kept my heart rate in what is considered zone 2. So, zone 2 is your easy pace conversational. You can, continue it on for a very long period of time without, exhaustion. Uh, so that was my training pace for the most part. That's about where my pace fell to keep my heart rate in that zone 2. During the race itself, though, all that goes out, and now you race, and now you run, as hard as you can while maintaining endurance without having to slow down. So you want a consistent pace, or, if you can and you're trained for it, to do, negative splits if you're able to. I've never much been one to focus on the negative split. I'm more about, for me, I prefer to run a more consistent race and have more even pace miles. So that's really what I was going for. And my pace during, the race was averaged out at 9:56 mile. So 9-minute, 56-second miles is what I averaged for a finish time of 2 hours and 10 minutes. My PR, by the way, was 2 hours and 6 minutes, last year before my fracture. So I told you I was 4 minutes off from my PR. And during my training, I didn't do any hill work. So those hills definitely factor into that pacing that I was running in the beginning and there at the end. And they definitely slowed me down a bit, as so many hills do. Um, and my other race really didn't have that many hills. So I think that does kind of factor in. Um, but the bike path that I train on does have a steady incline. It doesn't have at the where I run the bike path, it doesn't really have hills, but it does have some good long inclines. And so that was kind of the hill training that I did were the, long hill I or long inclines, and then when it's an out and back, so when you turn around, then you have your decline, with some rolling hills, along the way. So that was mostly where I trained, but I didn't do any hill specific training because I was afraid to aggravate my proximal hamstring tendinopathy that I'm still kind of, wobbling back and forth on. Although I have to say that I had zero issues with the hamstring tendinopathy during the race. Like before, during, after. The only time it bothered me was when I had to sit in the 4.5 hour car ride that bothers me. But the racing, the running didn't bother me at all. So that's positive news and shows, I'm doing well toward my healing on that proximal hamstring tendinopathy. Um, so anyway, the race itself, I think, was a total success. I think the only physical, I don't know, feelings that I had or effects that I had from the race was I did have a bit of tightness in my hip on the outside, though, not where I had the stress fracture. It was really more like IT band tightness and inflammation. So it was kind of over the outer side of the hip at the greater trochanter, which is, if you were to feel on the outside of your hips, you've got that bone that you can feel on the outer hip. It was right there and then kinda behind it, so it's kind of like, glute tightness and then IT band tightness over that trochanter. So, I mean, at least that's what I'm thinking it was. I didn't have an official diagnosis because now it's gone. So, it was just a little tight afterward, a little sore, so I did some foam rolling, used my lacrosse ball, um, just stretching, and, within a day or so, it was gone. So it's just kinda, overuse, right? Overuse, and so now I'm relaxing and taking care of it, and now it's gone away, which is how pain should work. It should be temporary, it shouldn't lead to long-term crutches. Um, the shoes that I wore, I was super excited that I got to wear my beautiful Saucony Elites. Now, these are the shoes that I got on the clearance rack, so I did not pay $275 for these shoes. I paid $70 for these shoes. So I was super excited to be able to wear them. By the way, if you have these racing shoes and you normally use inserts of any kind, I need to have, arch support in my shoes. I can't just use the little sock liner. There's not enough arch support in them, and they make my feet sore. So I took the sock liner out of these shoes, and then I was able to put my Curex, insoles into them. Perfect. It worked so well. I didn't think about my feet one time, except for that I could just keep going and they feel great. So if you have these racing shoes that don't have a nice ability to put a sock or to put your own insert in, a lot of times you could just take that sock liner out. It was really just a piece of styrofoam that was stuck in there with some sticky glue. It was easy to take out. So, tip if you have these racing shoes. Um, and the only other thing after the race that I had were, I mentioned I had those like twitchy legs, like calf muscles, and it was really hard. I wanted to take a nap and I just couldn't because they were so twitchy. It was keeping me awake. So I drank the ele- excuse me, I drank the element electrolytes And I also a good trick, if you ever have that, is to lay on your back and put your feet straight up the wall, so it's like you're making an L with your body up against the wall. So you kinda scoot your butt all the way against the wall and put your legs straight up, and I just laid there for, like, 10 minutes or so, 10, 15 minutes, depending on how I felt, and it helps a lot. It just kinda brings all the blood back down out of your lower limbs, and, it makes your circulation kind of work better that way. So I did that, and I felt a lot better after that. So it's a little trick for you if you ever have swelling in your calves after a run. That's a good trick. And then I also like to use calf compression sleeves, or you can use compression socks after your run. So I did that. I put on the compression sleeves. Um, Under my pant legs, and that felt a lot better too. And just gives it a little extra support and some compression, just again to bring that blood flow and circulation back into the rest of your body instead of pooling down in your feet and your calves. So I didn't get my nap that day, but it was okay. I had so much energy. So after that, I rested for a little bit, drank, and then went and met up with the rest of the family. And when we went out to a restaurant, and we had to pick a new restaurant though. I'm so, so, so sad. So if you are familiar with Santa Barbara, there was a restaurant there called Green Table, and I loved Green Table because they had this absolutely awesome raw apple pie, and it was absolutely delicious. A massive piece of pie that you get, and it's, fresh apples with cinnamon and, cranberries with some little, shredded carrot thrown in, and then it had, like, this, I think it's dates and pecans, crust that's all, like, made together in, like, a really thick, yummy crust. Oh, it was so good, and they closed. So the restaurant closed on October 30th, and my race was on November 3rd. I had just looked at the restaurant website, I don't know, earlier that week, but obviously before the 30th, and they were open because I checked their hours, and they were supposed to be open. And then that day after the race, we looked it up to see I don't know, we looked it up to see something, and my sister said, "Hey, Google says that it's closed permanently." Like, "What? No, it's not." And so we tried calling them. No, it's closed. So she went over there, and there was a note on the door thanking all of the restaurant patrons for all their 8 years of coming to them, and that they decided to close. And that was it. So sad because I love that restaurant. If anybody knows if they reopen anywhere or something, please tell me, please, because I miss their apple pie already. But anyway, we went to another restaurant. We went to Blue Owl. If you know Santa Barbara, then they had a lot of vegan options. So if you ever go to Santa Barbara and you need a restaurant, Blue Owl was really good. I'd had their grilled cheese, their vegan grilled cheese, and vegan fried rice. And then for dessert, I had an apple pastry. It was like a really yummy donut with some apple filling. So it was good, just not my apple pie that I'm used to. Um, and the fried rice, I just took most of it back to the hotel and ate it for dinner later. But anyway, that was my post-race meal, there. And, recovery, I just drove home the next day, stopped off at my other favorite restaurant, Seabird's Kitchen in Costa Mesa. Oh my god, that's so yummy. They have a few locations, so they're also in Long Beach too. But they're really good too. If you ever go there, their avocado chocolate mousse is to die for. So, as you can tell, when I travel, I have dessert. So, I deserve it by that point. Um, you know, Eat well 90% of the time, have some fun food 10%. Um, but yeah, right now, I'm feeling good. I'm a few days out from the race. And when I first came back, though, I got to say the next day after all that travel, it was my first day back to the office and working. And I really felt like the letdown. Post race blues are a real thing. And so I was really feeling the letdown. Plus, my body was still tired from all the racing and the traveling. And it was just a hard day. So, I again, give yourself grace when you have those days. I tried my best to do that and just tried to shut down early and get some rest, although I didn't because then it was election night and I was up, watching all the polls and, election results coming in for all the local races, things like that. So I didn't get a lot of sleep because of that, because I wanted to see all the results. um, but by the next day, then I was feeling better and I was actually able to get a little exercise in. So I'm mostly just focused on mobility now and some walking for the rest of the week. And then the second week back after the race, then I'll start incorporating a little more higher intensity work. So I do plan to really bump up the strength training again, and this time really be very consistent with more of a specific program rather than just a couple days a week, 15 minutes if I can, and I'll do a little less running. So I'll probably take that down to about 3 days of running rather than four and shorter mileage for a little bit. So I'm really in like the recovery portion of the periodized training plan now. So for about 3, 4 weeks, that's what I'll be doing. And then I'll start into more of a base training phase and see where this takes me next. I have a couple ideas of what I'm going to do next, but not ready for any official announcements yet. But I, am getting back on track with my eating. So when I travel, like I said, I just eat nearly with abandon, not really, but you know far worse, eating out at restaurants and things like that, a lot more of that when I'm traveling. So right now I'm back on track with my, fueling and, not just fueling, but, like, proper nutrition, and so I've decreased my carb intake quite considerably because I was at a really, really high level leading up to the race, and my output, my activity output has decreased significantly. So I'm bringing down the carbs right now while I'm in this lower activity. And then I'll, bump that back up a little bit as my activity increases again. But right now I'm just sort of taking in the feeling of accomplishment of going through the 12-week training plan, going through the race, having such a successful race as my first redemption race back from a stress fracture only a year after getting back on my feet, my own feet without sticks. So now I'm just sort of taking it all in. I'm past the post race blues. And now I'm just kind of enjoying getting back into some easy movement, and I'll just start to pick it up, as the time goes. But I do have some things in mind coming into 2025 about what I would like to accomplish. But like I said, I'm not quite at the announcement phase yet, but I am going to turn 50 in 2025, and that is a big deal. And that is that's a big number for me. So, well, from, most people, they reach 50 and they're like, you're either on top of the world, let's celebrate it, or you're looking at your life and going, you know what? I think I need to make some changes. I'm 50. Now's the time to start incorporating some life changes and some improvements. So really can kind of go either direction. But for me, I'm looking at 50 as okay, let's celebrate. Let's do something big to commemorate this, half a century. So I'm thinking in that direction right now. So stay tuned for whatever announcements I decide to make. But that won't be till summertime. So stay tuned. So in the meantime, I'm going to get back to my fitness regimen and enjoying that, and hopefully you will as well. Hopefully you will decide to join me on episode number 34 next week. And I hope you've enjoyed this episode and my redemption race recap and gotten a little something out of it. Of course, always I invite you to connect with me over on social media on Instagram. I'm at running.on.race. Carbs, or I'm on Facebook. Of course, I'm over on YouTube if you prefer to watch this, if you are listening to it on your podcast streaming. Um, so connect with me, join up, and I also have the vegan challenge. So the vegan pledge is still available. I have the link in the show notes. So if that's something that you're still interested in, you can go back and listen to episode number 32 where I introduced it and talked about it. But I'm keeping it open for the month of November. Um, and if you are interested in that and you want to take a look at it, please do. But it's really just supporting you. And the vegan pledge is that you replace one meal every day with a fully plant based meal. And if you want to do more, that's awesome and fantastic. But the pledge is simply, to get you started and, eased into taking on and incorporating a plant-based diet if it's not something that you've already done. You can also share that with your, friends or family who maybe are interested in the plant-based lifestyle, but just need a little extra support. So the link is in the show notes, totally free. Just something that I want to encourage because I believe that the plant based diet is the healthiest diet for most people. And I want people to know how easy it is to incorporate it and how healthy it can really be for you, for your everyday health and life, and for your endurance and activities. So, as you can see, I'm 100% plant based, have been for 7 years, and here I am running strong. So, hopefully, I am, a testament to a healthy plant based diet. All right. Well, that is it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you'll join me next week for another episode of Running on Carbs podcast. In the meantime, go and run your best life on carbs. I'm Coach Val. See you next time.